Imagine stepping out of a space so suffocatingly dark, so physically restrictive, that the simple act of standing fully upright feels like this totally alien concept.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You are in Belvar prison, you're a convicted criminal existing in this perpetual state of sensory deprivation.
Right.
And the only measure of time is just the scritch of distant claws and the rhythm of your own survival instincts.
Which is terrifying.
It really is. But then the heavy door opens.
Finally.
Right. But you aren't offered a pardon or a trial or even a basic explanation.
Of course not.
Instead, a member of the elite ruling class, a noble woman who operates with basically total impunity, presents you with a blackmail operation that, honestly, borders on the impossible.
It's basically a suicide mission.
Exactly, because your objective isn't to infiltrate a bank or, I don't know, a heavily guarded military installation.
No, your target is an ancient, sentient, magical library.
Yes, and to pull this off, you have to shed your entire identity. You have to assume the life of a deceased northern noblewoman, embed yourself within a hierarchy of the world's most powerful mages, and systematically dismantle the authority of the immortal, fiercely paranoid librarian who guards the institution.
No pressure, right.
Right. If your cover slips, you face the executioner. And if the library's own self-aware magic senses your deception, it will literally eradicate you from the inside out. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It is a phenomenal premise.
Yeah.
It places a character with absolutely zero systemic power at the exact center of this massive, continent-spanning geopolitical crisis.
Which is the labyrinth we are navigating today as we examine Kalyn Josephson's fantasy novel, The Library of Amorlin.
It's such a rich text.
It really is. And we've got a formidable stack of sources to pull from today. We're looking at comprehensive lore breakdowns, detailed analyses of the character arcs and mechanics of the magical systems at play, and the incredibly dense political maneuvering that really drives this narrative.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
So much. The mission of this deep dive is to map out this intricate world. We're unpacking the collision between a violently expanding, religiously driven military state and an ancient, supposedly neutral institution of magic.
And beneath all the spellcraft and espionage, we're looking at the mechanics of trauma. We're looking at the utility of truth in a post-truth political landscape.
Yes, and the environmental philosophy baked right into the world building. Okay, let's unpack this.
I think the foundational element we need to establish here is how belief systems physically manifest and shape reality in this world.
That's a huge point.
Yeah, we're looking at the friction generated when deeply entrenched state-sponsored dogma is challenged by an alternative, older truth.
Because the geography of this continent isn't just topographical, it's entirely ideological.
Exactly. The political borders are defined almost entirely by the spiritual and magical convictions of the populations inside them.
So let's start with that map, because the physical layout dictates the stakes of this entire heist. You have this massive landmass bordered by the Halian Sea, and it's fractured into 6 distinct sovereign territories.
Right, starting in the north.
Yeah, in the extreme north, barricaded behind the Terrasser Mountains, is Avaria. This is a closed-off ice kingdom, completely isolationist, untouched by outsiders for centuries.
They're a complete wildcard in the geopolitical landscape.
Totally. Then south of those peaks, the continent splits. On the western flank, you have Kalthos, which operates as this rigid, militaristic autocracy.
Very rigid.
And then on the east, Ayador, which functions as a wealthy, fiercely neutral nation governed by a council of 4 queens.
And if we look further south, the topography shifts drastically. You have Jakara, which is defined by its deserts and, crucially, its subterranean wealth.
Specifically, a magical metal called Mekhet.
Right. Then there is Miraval. This is a nation that has actually pivoted away from pure mysticism toward technological and mechanical advancement.
Like steampunk, almost.
Sort of, yeah. It's a very different vibe. And finally, anchoring the southern tip is the lush coastal territory of Riviere.
But the defining geographic feature, the absolute artery of the entire continent, is the Seven Veils River.
That river is everything.
It slices right down the center, acting as a natural border, but it flows inward. It converges at the absolute center of the map to completely encircle an independent sovereign island.
And sitting on that island is the Library of Amorlin.
Boom, right in the middle.
The positioning of the library is a total geopolitical nightmare for the surrounding nations.
Because it's not just a bunch of books.
Exactly. It isn't merely an archive or a repository of knowledge. It functions as an international arbiter. It controls the central waterway and operates completely outside the jurisdiction of any single crown.
It's like a magical UN.
Yeah, it is a sovereign entity that acts as a diplomatic neutral zone and, quite controversially, a massive wildlife sanctuary for magical beasts.
Which brings us to the core ideological fracture. Because in this world, the concept of beasts doesn't just mean regular wildlife. We're talking about creatures imbued with native magic.
Right.
The Library of Amorlin operates on the philosophy that magic inherently resides within these creatures, that they are the stabilizing force of the natural world, and that studying and preserving them is paramount to maintaining ecological and magical equilibrium.
The library views them as vital components of a holistic system. Kalthos, however, operates under a doctrine that fundamentally criminalizes nature.
It's so dark.
It is. The Kalish state religion, Hadronism, preaches that beasts are not natural animals, but the literal, physical manifestations of human sin.
That is just wild to think about.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the theological mechanics are fascinating. The belief is that if a person commits a transgression, a lie, a theft, an act of violence,
Any sin.
right, that abstract sin is expelled into the world and coalesces into a physical monster.
Wow.
Therefore, the only path to spiritual purification and the eventual return of their deity, Hadra, is the systematic, total eradication of every single beast on the continent.
I really want to pause on that because the state control aspect of Hadronism is terrifyingly efficient. Is it purely a cynical manipulation from the ruling class? Or is it a genuine internalized terror?
It's probably a mix of both.
Because when a society believes that a physical monster tearing through their village is the direct result of their neighbor telling a lie, the social paranoia must be absolute.
Oh, it's a self-sustaining loop of terror and control. By defining natural disasters, erratic beast behavior, and just general societal suffering as the byproduct of the commoner's sin,
Yeah.
the Kalish government creates an infallible scapegoat.
They never have to take the blame.
Exactly. The ruling class never has to take responsibility for famine or infrastructure failure. They simply point to the presence of beasts as proof of the populace's moral failing.
Which allows the state to justify draconian laws, limitless military spending, and aggressive territorial expansion.
Kalthos isn't merely hunting animals. They are engaged in an endless, holy resource war, disguised as a divine mandate to sanitize the environment.
And the enforcement arm of that mandate is the Malikinar.
Yes.
These are the elite, religiously indoctrinated military units armed with these incredibly lethal weapons called Viler blades. The sources paint a brutal picture of how this philosophy looks in practice.
Especially in that opening sequence set in the Isherwood.
Yes, the Isherwood. Let's talk about that.
The Isherwood serves as a physical representation of how Kalthos views the natural world, basically hostile, suffocating, and inherently corrupt.
It's this massive, swamp-like forest that chokes nearly 70% of the Kalish border.
The environment is described meticulously. You've got crooked, decaying branches, high humidity, and ink green leaves tipped in barbs that look like bone dust.
And it has this really creepy magical property, right? A dampening acoustic quality.
Yes, it's an environment where sound is actively swallowed. It creates a profound sense of isolation and claustrophobia for anyone operating within it.
So into that sensory vacuum steps a Malikinar unit. They're hunting a pride of Alcatir.
And an Alcatir is no small prey. You're looking at a massive apex predator. It has a feline body, a hawkish head, powerful feathered wings.
And the ensuing confrontation isn't a hunt, it's a mechanized slaughter.
They're a highly trained unit.
Right. The Malikinar don't just kill the creatures, they hack them apart with this algorithmic efficiency. But the kill is secondary to the religious theater of the aftermath.
That's the real point of it all.
They drag these massive carcasses into a pyre to be burned the following morning in a ritual meant to purify the sin that allegedly birthed them.
And you have to contrast that grim industrialized slaughter with the internal architecture of the Library of Amorlin.
The difference is night and day.
Within the library exists the Eyrie. This is not merely a large room. It is a marvel of spatial and sustained magic.
It's basically an entire ecosystem indoors.
Exactly. It houses diverse, magically regulated microclimates, from glacial peaks to arid dunes, designed explicitly to harbor and protect the very species the Malikinar are exterminating in the mud of the Isherwood.
You have two diametrically opposed models of interacting with the environment, militaristic subjugation versus magical stewardship.
And trapped right in the space between those two models is our protagonist, Kasira.
And I think the author makes a brilliant structural choice here by introducing us to a protagonist who possesses absolutely zero stake in either ideology.
No, Kasira is decidedly not a chosen one.
Definitely not.
The narrative aggressively subverts that trope. There is no hidden royal lineage, no ancient prophecy guiding her hand. She is a convicted criminal, entirely shaped by the crushing weight of the Kalish penal system.
Her perspective is so crucial because it strips away the romanticism of both the library's high magic and Kalthos's holy crusade.
Right. When we meet her, she's a product of Belvar prison, and the psychological conditioning of that place is severe.
She's only released through a forced military conscription program that drops her into the Malikanar's Unit 3.
Right. In the Northern Kalish dialect, this unit is referred to as the Kot, which translates to the nothing.
The penal battalion.
They are expendable meat shields treated with absolute disdain by the pure believers within the military hierarchy.
And the sociology of the expendable soldier really dictates Kasira's entire worldview.
She processes every interaction, every relationship through the mechanics of a con.
Right. She has no patriotic loyalty to Kalthos.
None, nor any spiritual reverence for Hadronism. Her psychology has been reduced to a brutal, localized loop, which she actively repeats as a mantra: sleep, wake, hunt, survive.
That isn't just a schedule, it's a trauma response. She has cauterized her own emotional capacity because empathy in the caught is a fatal liability.
But the state still finds a use for her specific skill set.
Because she's very good at what she does.
Enter Ambassador Vera Helson, who is the Kalish ambassador to the library and the cousin to the Kalish king. Vera identifies Kasira not as a soldier, but as a scalpel.
Because Kasira was previously affiliated with a high-level crime syndicate run by a man named Thane Ryark, she knows how to observe, how to dismantle security, and how to lie with absolute conviction.
Vera offers her a proposition that is essentially an execution order wrapped in a diplomatic passport.
The audacity of the operation is staggering. Vera has intercepted the travel documents of a northern noblewoman, Arlana Corinth, who conveniently perished en route to the library.
Vera forces Kasira into this identity with a multi-tiered objective. First, penetrate the library's defenses by presenting herself as the new assistant librarian.
Okay, step one.
Second, ingratiate herself with the current, notoriously difficult librarian to uncover whatever institutional vulnerability he is hiding.
Step two.
And third, weaponize that vulnerability to frame him for a conclave tribunal.
And the motivation behind this hostile takeover of a neutral magical entity isn't just religious zealotry. The theology is the smokescreen.
It usually is. The reality is macroeconomic.
The library sits directly between Kalthos and Jakara, and Jakara controls the mines producing Mekhet, the magical metal that Kalthos desperately needs to fuel its military-industrial complex.
But Kalthos can't march an army into Jakara without crossing the Seven Veils River and violating Amorlin's sovereignty.
So if Vera can install Kasira as a puppet librarian, Kalthos absorbs the library's magical infrastructure and secures an uncontested supply line straight into Jakaran territory.
Which places Kasira in an impossible psychological bind. She is executing a survival strategy on behalf of an empire she absolutely despises.
Yet, the text carefully breadcrumbs evidence of a deeply buried, fiercely guarded empathy within her. We are given a critical flashback to her childhood, prior to her parents perishing in a fire.
Her mother used to tell her stories about the library, framing it not as a den of sin, but as a bastion of wonder.
There's a specific memory of her mother placing a Talawel, a small, scaly, magical creature, into Kasira's hands. She was teaching her to observe the beast with curiosity rather than revulsion.
I would argue that memory is the only thing keeping her human. It proves the Kalish indoctrination didn't fully take root.
And we see that empathy leak out during the Ishawood hunt. After participating in the slaughter of an Alcatir mother, Kasira spots the surviving cub hidden behind the corpse, and she stops.
Her blade drops.
She deliberately allows the cub to flee into the brush.
That moment of hesitation is functionally a treasonous act in Kalthos.
It immediately draws the suspicion of Commander Dessen and a deeply zealous soldier named Jevin.
In their eyes, showing mercy to a beast is a confession of one's own spiritual corruption. It highlights the tragedy of her situation. Her most fundamental, humane impulse is her greatest operational vulnerability.
It also dictates how she handles her interpersonal relationships within the Malikinar. She isn't entirely isolated. She has a fierce defender in a soldier named Revna and a charming medic named Paskar.
But she actively repels them. Revna is particularly interesting because she genuinely believes in the Hadron cause. She thinks she is saving Kasira's soul.
But Kasira views her own friendship as a contagion. She believes that letting anyone get close will inevitably result in their destruction, so she weaponizes her own coldness to protect them.
It is a classic trauma response. Self-isolation disguised as pragmatism. She has to believe she is the nothing, because if she acknowledges her own humanity, she has to acknowledge the horror of what she is participating in.
But the true test of that manufactured apathy comes when she arrives at the gates of Amorlin. Imagine the cognitive dissonance. You've spent weeks meticulously crafting the persona of Erlana Corinth, a pious, rigid, Kalish noblewoman who must view magic with absolute disgust.
You arrive at the library intending to destroy it. But the moment she crosses the threshold, the sheer scale of the spatial magic shatters her expectations.
The foyer isn't just a lobby, it's a sprawling, magically sustained greenhouse teeming with flora and the hidden, glowing eyes of tiny beasts observing her arrival.
The architectural impossibilities continue as she enters the main complex. The library is infinitely larger internally than its exterior dimensions suggest.
It features shifting corridors that reorganize themselves, towering vertical archives, and a colossal stained-glass dome created by a historical mage named Liavaneris.
It demands immense psychological discipline for Kasira to stand amidst that overwhelming wonder and outwardly project the disdain required of her Kalish cover identity.
And she has to maintain that facade while navigating a really complex social ecosystem. You have mages from across the continent.
There's First Mage May, or Era May, who projects warmth but operates with a quiet, lethal protectiveness over the institution.
You have Elie, a younger mage whose immediate prejudice against Kasira's Kalish origins creates constant friction. And then you have the leopard spirits.
The inclusion of the leopard spirits is a brilliant detail regarding the mechanics of the magic system.
They're not just pets.
No, these are not merely summoned creatures. They are entities born directly from the library's ambient power. They represent a symbiotic relationship between the institution's accumulated knowledge and the natural magic it hoards.
Kasira is assigned one named Eilis to act as her guide and custodian.
Eilis is fantastic because he punctures the solemnity of the place.
You have this majestic, magical spirit who spends half his time complaining about mages leaving teacups on ancient texts and generally disrespecting the archives.
But underneath the humor, Eilis is deeply woven into the building's sentience, because the library itself is self-aware.
It hides doors, elongates hallways, and actively monitors Kasira. The building knows she is an anomaly, which culminates in the initiation sequence down in the catacombs.
The catacombs serve as the inverse of the Eyrie. It is the ancient, unpolished bedrock of the island. Dark stone, volatile artifacts, and dangerous, unrestrained beasts.
The librarian guides her into a hidden cavern housing a subterranean silver pool fed by the descending roots of the Amorlin tree.
The initiation is brutally straightforward. She must drink the water. If the library's sentience accepts her intentions, she gains a portion of its magic and the title of Assistant Librarian.
And if it detects her deceit and rejects her, the magic will instantly kill her.
The tension here relies entirely on the paradox of Kasira's motivations. She has to drink to maintain the con. But deep down, beneath the trauma and the cynicism, she wants it.
She craves the wonder her mother promised. She is exhausted from existing as a weapon. She desperately wants to belong to something beautiful.
So she drinks?
Yeah.
And the reaction is immediate and violent.
The magic forces a psychological confrontation. It doesn't provide a warm initiation. It assaults her with a prophetic vision.
She sees the Library of Amorlin burning. She sees the mages dead on the grounds. And she sees the Kalish flag flying over the ruins.
The magic is showing her the exact logical conclusion of the mission she has agreed to execute. It forces her to look at the devastation she's bringing to their doorstep.
Yet despite showing her that destruction, the library accepts her. It doesn't kill her. It binds its magic to her. It's a massive contradiction.
Why would an ancient, self-preserving entity grant access to its own power to the person actively plotting its downfall?
That paradox is the central mystery of her acceptance. Is the library making a calculated risk, believing it can change her allegiances? Or does it see a utility in her arrival that supersedes her current intentions?
Regardless of the why, the immediate effect is that Kasira is now a conduit for immense spatial magic, which she has absolutely no idea how to control.
The learning curve is steep and physical. Magic in this world isn't just reciting incantations. It's tied to mass and momentum.
During her first attempt at spatial teleportation, she miscalculates the coordinates and violently zaps herself 100 feet straight up into the open air above the library grounds.
She nearly plummets to her death before the librarian manages to catch her.
She's also stumbling across terrifying artifacts in the stacks, like a massive broadsword wrapped in white linen that hums with the suppressed, lethal energy.
The environment is inherently volatile. But her most difficult obstacle isn't the magic. It's the man trying to manage it. Let's talk about Allaster St. Archer.
Allaster is a phenomenal study in the burden of leadership and immortality. He is originally from a coastal settlement in Miraval called Spencer.
His background is rooted in academic brilliance. He was a recognized prodigy who entered the magical academy at the age of 5 after cataloging a new subspecies of the Solon bird.
He is an intellectual heavyweight, but when Kasira meets him, he is fundamentally exhausted.
He is incredibly abrasive. He operates with this simmering paranoia, constantly manipulating these strange black metal henolite rings on his fingers.
His introduction to Kasira is essentially a dismissal. He knows her appointment was forced by Ambassador Vera, so he assumes from minute one that she is a Kalish asset.
He isolates her, refuses to train her, and basically hopes she will fail on her own.
But we have to analyze his hostility in the context of the geopolitical collapse happening around him. Allaster isn't just managing a library, he is attempting to hold a fractured continent together.
The natural magic is destabilizing. Earthquakes are more frequent, beasts are increasingly aggressive. He is engaged in desperate diplomatic negotiations with Queen Saren of Iador and Archminister Cernos of Riviere, trying to build a coalition against Kalthos' expansionism.
And he is failing. His rigid adherence to neutrality has alienated his allies, including his own brother, High Mage Embrick of Miraval, leading to a profound personal estrangement.
And shadowing every decision he makes is the ghost of the previous librarian, Mora Lemonian.
The official institutional narrative is that Mora was tragically killed during a beast attack down in the catacombs.
But the mere mention of her name causes Allaster to physically shut down. He is carrying an ocean of unprocessed grief and guilt regarding her fate.
What's fascinating here is how the dynamic between Kasira and Allaster evolves. It doesn't begin with mutual respect. It begins as an intricate game of counterintelligence.
Kasira leverages her background as a street thief to deconstruct him. She stops trying to act like a pious noblewoman and starts reading his baseline behaviors.
She notes the precise moments he spins those henolite rings, identifying it as a physical tell for when he is concealing information or managing stress.
She realizes that you can't charm a paranoid academic, but you can distract him with data. She starts mirroring his obsession with history.
She feigns intense curiosity about specific artifacts, asking him to explain the mechanics of the emotional absorbing stone or the historical context of the cipher quill.
And Allaster, who is at his core an isolated history nerd, falls for it. He can't resist the opportunity to lecture, and through those lectures, the suspicion slowly gives way to genuine banter.
She effectively bypasses his political defenses by engaging his intellectual passions. As she chips away at his isolation, she sees the reality of his existence.
He has locked himself in his office, pushed away loyal friends like May, and attempted to shoulder the survival of magic entirely on his own.
Kasira's intrusion forces him to engage with another human being on a level he hasn't allowed in decades.
But just as they are establishing real trust, the geopolitical reality crashes through the doors. They receive a magical distress signal. Spencer is under attack.
Spencer being Allaster's hometown. A notorious, highly lethal mercenary outfit known as the Riverine is systematically destroying the coastal settlement.
Allaster and Kasira utilize the library's portal network to drop directly into the combat zone, fighting alongside Allaster's estranged brother, Embrick.
The battle sequence in Spencer serves a dual purpose. On the surface, it forces Kasira to physically defend Allaster, thereby seemingly cementing her loyalty to him.
But beneath that, it delivers a devastating revelation regarding the true scope of Kalthos' strategy. During the chaos, Kasira corners a wounded Riverine mercenary and extracts a critical piece of intelligence. The Riverine are not operating independently. They were contracted by Thane Rhyark.
Thane Rhyark being her former crime boss from the Kalish underworld, it's a brilliant collision of her past and present.
She realizes that Ambassador Vera isn't just trying to annex the library. The Kalish government is utilizing proxy crime syndicates to execute false flag operations, destabilizing the economies and borders of the other nations to create a pretext for war.
It shatters the compartmentalization Kasira has been relying on. She believed her mission was isolated to the library.
Finding her old syndicate orchestrating mass casualties in Miraval forces her to recognize that her complicity has continent-wide ramifications. Kalthos is using the machinery of her past trauma to burn down the rest of the world.
And the tragic irony is that this realization hits exactly when she starts to feel a sense of ownership over her new life. She actually finds peace mucking out the beast enclosures in the Eyrie.
She enjoys sitting by the fire, reading while Eyeless the leopard complains about the draft. She is developing complex, genuine feelings for Allaster,
She has finally found a sanctuary, and she is the bomb planted beneath it.
which accelerates us toward Vera's masterstroke. Ambassador Vera recognizes that Allaster's unauthorized intervention in Spencer has left him politically vulnerable.
She capitalizes on this by orchestrating the assassination of Thane Riark, Kasira's former boss, inside the halls of the Library of Amorlin.
The audacity of that move is chilling. Vera smuggles her own operative into a sovereign magical neutral zone, executes him, and uses the corpse to frame the Librarian.
She weaves a narrative that Allaster, unhinged by his refusal to admit Kalish mages and his rogue actions in Spencer, murdered a Kalish citizen on Amorlin soil.
With the body as leverage, Vera formally triggers a conclave.
The conclave is the ultimate political stress test for the continent. It mandates a gathering of the sovereign leaders from the Six Realms, granting them the collective authority to strip the Librarian of his power if they determine the institution is failing its mandate.
The procedural mechanics of this tribunal demonstrate a masterclass in post-truth politics. As the proceedings unfold, it becomes glaringly apparent that forensic truth is irrelevant. The leaders are voting based entirely on their own domestic agendas.
It's pure political theater. Iador's queens are running an economic calculus. They want to maintain the profitable trade routes that neutrality affords them, so they are hesitant to rock the boat.
Kalthos is loudly demanding intervention, using the fabricated murder to push their religious and resource-driven war machine. Riviere is inherently skeptical of an immortal mage wielding unchecked power.
The library is bleeding political capital by the second.
And Kasira is caught in a vice. King Arthur of Kalthos approaches her with a separate ultimatum: leverage her position to help him remove his ambitious cousin Vera from power.
Meanwhile, Vera threatens Kasira with immediate exposure and a permanent return to the suffocating dark of Belvar prison if she doesn't testify against Allaster and secure his removal.
This is the absolute crucible for Kasira's character. For her entire life, her survival has depended on her ability to detach, to run the con without emotional investment.
But as Thane warned her before his death, the cardinal sin of the grifter is forgetting the lie. The mask has fused to her face.
She looks at May, at Eyeless, at Allaster, and she realizes she cannot pull the trigger. She cannot destroy the only true home she has ever known to save herself.
Her decision to abandon the cover identity is profound. In the midst of this high-stakes tribunal, under the gaze of the continent's most powerful monarchs, Vera preemptively strikes.
Recognizing Kasira's hesitation, Vera exposes her. She strips away the persona of Erlana Corinth, revealing to the conclave that the assistant librarian is, in fact, a convicted criminal pulled from the depths of a Kalish penal colony.
Vera uses Kasira's very existence as proof of Allaster's gross incompetence.
But Allaster's reaction subverts the entire political calculation. Instead of disavowing her to save his own position, he doubles down.
He steps forward, looks the assembled monarchs in the eye, and declares that his authority as the librarian supersedes the penal codes of Kalthos.
He states that he knew exactly who she was, and he accepted her because the inherent magic of Amorlin chose her. He places the entire weight of his immortal legacy on the line to shield a former thief.
It is a stunning display of loyalty, but politically it is a catastrophic miscalculation. The conclave operates on optics, not sentiment.
By claiming a Kalish criminal as his chosen successor, amidst a murder scandal, he alienates the remaining moderate voices.
The vote proceeds, and the result is a 3-2 decision against the library. Allaster is formally stripped of his authority.
He is immediately detained by the Kalish Malikinar, slated for extradition back to Kalthos to face a rigged trial for murder.
The imagery is devastating. The immortal guardian of the library is dragged away in irons, leaving Kasira standing completely alone in the center of the tribunal.
She is now technically the Librarian of Amorlin, but she is utterly powerless, presiding over an institution that has just been politically conquered by a hostile military state.
So what does this all mean? From a structural standpoint, you might conclude that this political defeat constitutes the narrative's lowest point. The hostile takeover is complete, the sanctuary is compromised.
However, the true horror of the novel's climax isn't political, it's physiological.
There is a final layer to this power dynamic that completely recontextualizes Allaster's behavior throughout the entire book.
In the chaotic aftermath of the vote, before the Malikanar can drag him out of the building, Allaster secures a brief moment alone with Kasira in his office.
And he finally addresses the one mystery she couldn't solve, the black metal henolite rings. He takes them off.
The removal of those rings triggers an immediate, violent biological cascade.
The text provides a visceral description of the transformation. The copper pigment drains from his hair, replacing it with a stark, unnatural white.
The skeletal structure at the base of his spine shifts as a spotted tail erupts. Fine, silver fur begins to aggressively map across his skin, and the pupils of his eyes constrict into vertical, feline slits. He's physically mutating into a beast.
This is the Librarian's curse. Allaster drops the final devastating truth about the mechanics of Amorlin's magic.
The immense spatial and elemental power granted to the Librarian is not a gift. It is a corrosive agent.
The human vessel simply cannot contain that volume of raw natural magic indefinitely. Eventually, the magic rewrites the host's biology, eroding their consciousness and transforming them into a feral apex predator driven entirely by instinct.
A beast that will violently dismantle the very library it was sworn to protect.
This revelation forces us to entirely reevaluate Allaster's psychology. The role of the assistant librarian is not an apprenticeship. It is not about succession planning.
The assistant librarian is the designated executioner. Allaster didn't need a student. He needed someone with the specific psychological fortitude to kill him when his humanity finally eroded.
Which casts a horrifying new light on the fate of Amorlin. The official narrative was a lie constructed to protect the institution.
Morna didn't die in a random beast attack in the catacombs. The curse consumed her. She transformed into a feral monster, and Allaster, a man who deeply, profoundly loved her, was forced to draw a bow and put an arrow through her heart to stop her from slaughtering the mages.
The philosophical weight of this construct is staggering. True power within this world demands the ultimate physical and spiritual sacrifice.
When we look back at Allaster's intense isolation, his abrasive demeanor, and his deliberate alienation of his brother Ambric, we realize these were not the actions of a grumpy academic.
These were the calculated, desperate maneuvers of a dying man attempting to quarantine his own impending monstrosity.
He pushed everyone away because he refused to saddle the people he loved with the trauma of having to execute him. He bore the psychological weight of his own execution date entirely alone.
And then consider the trauma he is inflicting on Kasira in this moment. Think about her arc. She was raised in the dark. She was forced into the Isherwood to slaughter beasts just to earn a meal.
She finally escapes that cycle of violence, finds a mentor who sees her worth, and falls in love with him.
And now the universe, and Allaster himself, is demanding that she pick up a blade and end his life. She's being asked to murder her own salvation.
Her response to that demand is the defining moment of her character. She does not capitulate. Her reaction is one of absolute furious defiance.
She rejects the binary choice presented to her by centuries of magical tradition. She vows to utilize her unique background, the cunning of a street thief combined with the raw power of the library, to dismantle the curse itself.
This refusal to accept a doomed fate establishes an incredibly high-stakes trajectory for the sequel, A Sanctuary of Beasts.
Take a breath and look at the massive scope of the journey we've just unpacked. We followed a deeply cynical, traumatized criminal as she was weaponized by a fascist state to dismantle an ancient archive of magic.
We watched her execute the con of a lifetime, only to have her rigid survival instincts dismantled by the very wonders she was sent to destroy.
It's a profound exploration of how the protective lies we tell ourselves eventually crack under the weight of authentic connection. Kasira had to completely lose her fabricated identity to locate her actual humanity.
And that journey resonates precisely because it mirrors the psychological armor we all utilize. While we aren't infiltrating magical libraries, we constantly deploy our own smaller cons to navigate professional hierarchies or protect our emotional vulnerabilities.
We curate personas. Kasira's evolution challenges us to identify the moment when the mask we wear for protection begins to suffocate the person beneath it.
When you finally encounter a community or a truth that demands your authenticity, are you willing to risk the safety of the lie to defend it? Kasira risked a return to a century deprivation cell to stand by her truth.
It's a heavy, vital question, and I want to leave you, our listener, with one final provocative angle to consider long after this deep dive concludes. We've accepted Allaster's premise that the librarian's transformation is a curse, a hostile corruption of the human form caused by an overdose of magic.
But let's look at the broader philosophical conflict of the novel. The Library of Amorlin is fundamentally dedicated to the preservation of beasts and the balance of nature. Kalthos is obsessed with sanitizing, controlling, and destroying that nature.
That's a crucial distinction,
Right.
right? So what if the transformation isn't a corruption at all?
If beasts are the purest manifestation of natural magic, what if becoming a beast is the magic's ultimate mechanism for returning the human steward to the natural ecosystem?
What if it's not a disease, but an elevation, a profound communion with nature? And what if the only reason it manifests as violent and feral is because the human consciousness, desperate for control, violently resists the biological change?
That is a phenomenal hypothesis. It suggests that the tragedy of the librarian is not the magic itself, but the human ego's inability to surrender to the natural order. It perfectly encapsulates the environmental anxiety Josephson has woven into the very DNA of the world building.
It flips the entire narrative on its head, something to chew on as you wait for the sequel.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the political and magical stacks of Amorlin.
We hope you enjoyed navigating the espionage, the geopolitics, and the heavy secrets hidden within. Keep questioning the narratives you're handed, keep looking past the masks, and always seek the truth beneath the stories. Until next time.